You know, Mike, I thought this whole contract marriage thing was a genius move, I said into the phone, leaning back in a leather chair so expensive it probably cost more than my first car. Solves the debt, reboots the career, a clean transaction. The first few weeks were exactly that, a transaction. Chloe and I lived in this massive, echoing house like polite strangers sharing a luxury hotel suite. The place was all glass and steel and gleaming marble floors that bounced every sound back at you twice as loud. We ate dinner at opposite ends of a dining table long enough to land a small plane on, the silence between us broken only by the clink of silverware on porcelain. She tried, I'll give her that. She put flowers in vases and asked about my day. I gave her the polite, abbreviated version. She was warm, and I was present. I treated the house like a high-end office with a comfortable bed, a base of operations, nothing more. Then one evening, she caught me staring at a heavy oak door off the main hallway. "That leads down to the wine cellar," she said, her voice soft. "We should explore it sometime. Dad said there are some incredible vintages down there." The words caught in my throat. A cold sweat prickled the back of my neck, instant and unwelcome. The image flashed in my mind, not of wine bottles, but of splintered wood, darkness, and the smell of damp earth. "No," I said, way too quickly. Chloe blinked, surprised by my sharpness. I cleared my throat, forcing a casual tone. "Mold," I lied, the word feeling clumsy in my mouth. "I'm, allergic. Bad reaction to damp, musty places." "Shit, Jake, get a grip," a voice in my head snapped. "It's just a damn basement." But the sick, heavy feeling in my gut was real. It was an old reflex, one I'd spent 25 years explaining away. Chloe didn't push it. She just nodded, her expression softening with something like understanding. "Oh, of course. I'm sorry, I didn't know." Later that night, instead of suggesting we go down to the cellar, she brought 2 glasses of wine up to my office. We sat and talked. Not about the contract, not about my failed business or her family's empire. We talked about stupid movies, bad travel experiences, the one time she tried to bake bread and nearly burned the kitchen down. For the first time, the house felt a little smaller, a little less cold. Things started to feel normal, almost. The first strange thing happened on a Tuesday. A storm was raging outside, rain lashing against the floor-to-ceiling windows of my office. I was working late, sketching out a new concept, when the smell hit me. It wasn't just damp earth from the rain. This was different. It was thick, heavy. The smell of soil that hasn't seen the sun in 100 years, mixed with something else. Something faintly sweet, like decay. It was so familiar it made the hairs on my arms stand up. I felt my stomach clench. I got up, my chair scraping loudly in the quiet room. I checked the window seals. Perfect. I walked over to the air conditioning vent, felt the cool, clean air blowing out. Nothing. I paced the room for a minute, the smell clinging to the inside of my nose, and then, as quickly as it had arrived, it was gone. Vanished. Just the storm, I told myself, sitting back down at my desk. The rain's kicking up weird smells from the garden. My heart was still hammering against my ribs, but my brain had found a box to put the experience in. A logical, reasonable box. I went back to work. A few nights later, I woke up. The room was pitch black, silent except for Chloe's steady breathing beside me. But something had pulled me from sleep. A sound. I held my breath, listened. Scrap. It was faint, coming from downstairs. A dry, dragging sound, like fingernails being pulled slowly across old wood. My blood went cold. I slipped out of bed, my feet silent on the thick rug. I grabbed the heavy aluminum baseball bat I kept in the back of my closet. A relic from college, but it felt solid in my hands. I moved through the dark house, my senses on high alert. Every creak of the floorboards under my weight sounded like a gunshot. I reached the bottom of the stairs. The house was still. The only sound was the low hum of the refrigerator. I scanned the massive open-plan living area. Shadows played tricks on my eyes, turning chairs into crouching figures, lamps into tall, thin men. Nothing. Then I saw it. The door to the cellar. The one Chloe had pointed out. The one I had made a point to check, to make sure was securely locked every single night before I went to bed. It was open, just a crack, a sliver of deeper darkness in the gloom. I know I locked that door, I know it. I could picture my hand turning the deadbolt, the solid, reassuring thunk it made. But my mind was already racing, searching for another box. Did I? Maybe I was tired, distracted. I must have forgotten. I crept forward, bat raised. I pushed the door. It swung inward on silent hinges, revealing the top of a stone staircase descending into blackness. A gust of cool, musty air washed over me. The smell, that same smell of deep, wet earth. I slammed the door shut. My hand was shaking so badly it took me 3 tries to get the deadbolt turned. I stood there for a long time, my forehead pressed against the cool wood, listening to my own ragged breathing. I didn't go back to sleep that night. The next week, Chloe came into my office, her face lit with a bright smile. She was holding a large, flat, rectangular object wrapped in brown paper. "A late housewarming gift," she said, placing it on my desk. I unwrapped it carefully. It was a framed map. An antique, sepia-toned map of my old hometown. It was a beautiful gesture, thoughtful, a way of bringing a piece of my past into our new life. "I found it in an old antique shop online," she explained, her finger tracing the glass. "I thought you'd like it." I forced a smile. "I do. Thank you, Chloe. It's—" My voice trailed off. My eyes had found it. The small grid of streets where I grew up. Miller's Lane, Oak Street, and the little cul-de-sac at the end. I traced the property lines with my eyes, my finger hovering over the glass. There was my old house. There was the Johnsons' place next door. And there, where Sarah's house should have been, was just an empty square. A blank space with a small faded notation I couldn't quite make out. A chill, deep and sudden, snaked its way up my spine, so cold it felt like an injection of ice water. "It's perfect," I finished, my voice sounding hollow and distant to my own ears. Chloe beamed, kissed me on the cheek, and left me to my work. I stared at the map for the rest of the night, a cold dread coiling in my stomach. Later, when the house was quiet and Chloe was asleep, I took the map off the wall. I carried it to the large walk-in closet in the guest bedroom. I shoved it to the back, behind a stack of old blueprints and a winter coat I'd never wear in this climate, and shut the door. Hiding the map didn't work. You can't just shove a problem into a closet and pretend it doesn't exist. It just festers in the dark. Still, I tried. For Chloe's sake, I tried to be normal. And for a while, it almost felt real. We found a rhythm. I'd make coffee in the morning, she'd make dinner at night. We'd argue about which terrible reality TV show to watch. We'd sit on the couch, close enough for our shoulders to touch, and talk about nothing. The silence in the house wasn't a void anymore. It was comfortable. I was starting to genuinely care about her, not as a business partner, not as the woman who bailed me out, as Chloe. It was the way she'd bite her lip when she was concentrating on a book, or the dumb little dance she did when a song she liked came on the radio. Simple things, human things. And that, of course, is when everything got worse. Because now I had something to lose. My perfectly logical, walled-off world had been breached, and I was terrified of what might follow her inside. The dream came first. It wasn't just a dream. It was the memory, cranked up to 11 and playing on a loop in ultra-high definition. I'm 8 years old again, crammed into that old wardrobe. The smell of mothballs and cedarwood is so strong it makes my eyes water. Through the crack in the door, I see her, Sarah. Her back is to me. She stops counting. Just stands there in the middle of the cellar, perfectly still. The single bare bulb hanging from the ceiling buzzes, casting long, distorted shadows. She turns, slowly. Her movements are jerky, like a marionette with tangled strings. She looks right at the wardrobe, right at the crack, right at me.
Her eyes, they weren't her eyes. They were like two polished stones, reflecting the dim light but showing nothing behind them. Her mouth opened, a perfect little O, but the voice didn't come from her lips.
It came from everywhere at once, a low, grinding sound that vibrated in my teeth. I found you. No, that's not right. It wasn't what she said in the memory. It was supposed to be, I found Dad. But in the dream, it was always, I found you. And then the sound would change, deepening into the sickening crunch of shifting earth and splintering wood. I woke up with a gasp, kicking the sheets away. My t-shirt was soaked, plastered to my skin. Chloe stirred beside me, a soft murmur in her sleep. My heart was a jackhammer against my ribs. I sat on the edge of the bed for a long time, just breathing, trying to push the sound of grinding rock out of my head. It's just a dream, you idiot. Stress. That's the box I put it in. A nice, neat box labeled stress-induced nightmare. A few days later, I was driving home from a meeting that had run late. It was one of those miserable nights where the rain isn't really rain, just a fine, greasy mist that makes the streetlights bleed into fuzzy halos on the wet asphalt. I was tired. My brain felt like it was full of sand. I turned onto our street, the big, empty houses looming in the dark on either side. And I saw her. Just for a second, standing on the sidewalk, half hidden by the shadow of a big oak tree. A little girl, a worn, faded yellow dress. Her hair was dark and matted. She was just standing there, under the sickly orange glow of a streetlight, watching my car approach. My foot slammed on the brake, purely on instinct. The tires screeched on the slick road. A car behind me laid on its horn, a long, angry blast that snapped me out of it. My head whipped back to the sidewalk. Nothing. Just an empty patch of wet grass under a streetlight. No little girl, no yellow dress, nothing. Fuck, I whispered, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tight my knuckles were white. Fucking hell, Jake, get a grip. I pulled the car over, my whole body trembling. I just sat there, the engine idling, the windshield wipers smearing the mist back and forth. I'm seeing things. I'm cracking up. The logic was screaming at me. Lack of sleep, high-pressure job, a new marriage. It all added up. A perfect storm for a minor psychological break. Another box. A bigger, uglier box this time, but a box nonetheless. I didn't tell Chloe about the dream or the girl on the street. How could I? Hey honey, our sham marriage is going so great that I'm starting to hallucinate dead kids? Yeah, that would go over well. But I couldn't keep it locked down forever. The dam finally broke at 2 in the morning a week later. I hadn't been sleeping well. I'd just lie there, staring at the ceiling, listening to every creak and groan of the house. That night, I couldn't take it anymore. I got up and went downstairs. I don't know why. It was like being pulled by a string. I ended up standing in the main hallway, just staring at the cellar door. The heavy oak door. It was locked. I knew it was locked. I'd checked it 3 times before coming up to bed. But it didn't matter. I could feel something, a coldness seeping from underneath it. I could smell it, faintly, that deep, wet earth smell. I don't know how long I stood there, just frozen, my feet rooted to the marble floor. My mind was completely blank. Jake? Chloe's voice was so soft I thought I'd imagined it. I turned my head. She was standing at the bottom of the stairs, wrapped in a silk robe, her face etched with concern. She didn't look angry or annoyed that I'd woken her, just worried. She walked over, didn't say another word. She just sat down on the floor, right there in the hallway, and leaned her back against the wall opposite the door. She patted the spot next to her. For a minute, I didn't move. Then my legs just sort of gave out, and I slid down the wall to sit beside her. We sat in silence. The only sound was the hum of the refrigerator. And then I just started talking. The words spilled out of me, clumsy and broken. I told her everything. About playing hide and seek when I was 8. About Sarah. About the wardrobe and the splintered door in the corner. The smell. Her whispering, "I found Dad."
the way she just vanished, the way her family was gone the next day. I told her how for 25 years I'd convinced myself it was just a kid's overactive imagination, a story I'd built to explain why I was so terrified of a stupid basement. I expected her to tell me I was crazy, to rationalize it the way I always did.
To tell me I needed to see someone. Instead, she just reached over and took my hand. Her fingers laced through mine, warm and steady. My own hand was ice cold and trembling. She let the silence sit for a long moment after I finished. Then she squeezed my hand. "Jake," she said, and her voice was firm, resolute. "We're going back there." I just stared at her. "We're going back to your hometown," she continued, her eyes locked on mine. "We're going to find that house. You need to see it. You need to stand in front of it and see that it's just a house. You need to face this, or it's going to eat you alive." She saw the hesitation on my face, the architect in me recoiling from the lack of a plan. She leaned in a little closer. "Think of it like a project, an architectural survey. We're investigating the foundation of this fear. We'll find the blueprints, we'll figure it out." The phone call from Michael came the next day, while I was staring at a blueprint, not seeing any of the lines. "Yo, you alive over there?" His voice boomed through the speaker. "You sound like a ghost lately." I tried to force some energy into my voice. "Hey, Mike, nah, just slammed. New projects, you know how it is." "Right, Mr. Big Shot architect living in a palace," he laughed. "Don't forget us little people." We talked for a few more minutes, the usual bullshit about sports and work. But every word I said felt like a lie. This was my best friend, the guy I'd known since college, and I couldn't tell him that I thought I was losing my goddamn mind. When I hung up, the feeling that washed over me was awful. It was a profound sense of being utterly and completely alone. Even with Chloe in the next room, even with her holding my hand in the dark, I felt like I was standing on one side of a deep chasm, and the rest of the world was on the other, and something was in that chasm waiting for me to fall. The drive back was 6 hours of highway hypnosis. The white lines on the asphalt blurred into a single continuous ribbon pulling us back in time. For the first time in weeks, the grinding noise in my head went quiet. I felt clean, logical. I had a plan, a project, just like Chloe said, an architectural survey of a bad memory. I laid out the possibilities in my head, neat and tidy like blueprints. Possibility A: the house is still there. I'll see it, realize it's just a dumpy old house with a normal basement, and the fear will seem childish. The memory will lose its power. Best case scenario. Possibility B: the house has been torn down. Maybe it was condemned, maybe there was a fire. Tragic, but explainable. We find the public records, confirm the Davis family lived there, and I get closure. Possibility, well, there was no possibility C. The house existed. It had to. It was the foundation of everything. Chloe sat in the passenger seat, scrolling through something on her phone, occasionally reading a ridiculous headline out loud. She was giving me space. She knew my brain was working, trying to box this thing in, to nail it down with facts and figures. Her hand rested on the center console, close enough for me to touch. I didn't, but knowing it was there kept me from gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. "Almost there," I said, my voice sounding rusty. We took the exit for Northgate, my hometown. The name itself felt like something from another life. The same old welcome sign was there, faded and peeling. The trees hung low over the road, older and thicker than I remembered. It was like driving into a photograph of itself. "Are you okay?" Chloe asked softly, putting her phone down. "Yeah, I'm good." A lie. My heart was starting to beat a little too fast, a frantic little bird trapped in my ribs. "It's just weird. It's all smaller." I made the turns from memory. Left at the old gas station,
right past the park where I scraped my knee open so bad I needed stitches. Then the final turn, onto Elm Street. My hands were slick on the wheel. "It's just down here," I said, more to myself than to her. "The third house on the left, white with blue shutters, or they were blue back then. Big oak tree out front." I slowed the car, my eyes scanning the familiar houses. The Miller house, the Peterson house. Then, nothing. I stopped the car in the middle of the road. Chloe looked at me, then followed my gaze. My hand was up, pointing at a patch of weeds and overgrown grass between two perfectly normal suburban homes.
A lot. An empty fucking lot. Jake? My hands just hung there in the air, trembling slightly. My mouth opened, but no words came out. It felt dry, like it was full of dust. I swallowed. It didn't help. "No," I finally managed to whisper. "No, it was right there." There was no rubble, no old foundation, no sign that anything had ever been built on that land. It was just earth, unbroken, wild, as if it had been sitting empty for a century. Maybe you have the wrong street," Chloe suggested gently. "No, I don't." I could feel the panic starting to bubble up in my chest, hot and sharp. "I played on this street my entire childhood. That's the Petersons' house. That's the Millers. It was right here. I know it was." I got out of the car, the door hanging open. I walked to the edge of the lot, staring at the tangled grass, the few sad-looking wildflowers. My brain was screaming at me. "You misremembered. It's a false memory. Stress." But the smell hit me then. Faint, so faint I thought I imagined it. The smell of damp soil. Chloe was by my side in a second, her hand on my arm. "Okay," she said, her voice steady and calm, an anchor in the storm that was kicking up in my head. "Okay, so it's gone. They must have torn it down completely and resodded the whole lot. Let's find someone who's been here a while, someone who would remember." Just down the block, a small sign I hadn't noticed before hung over a storefront. "Henderson's Antiques and Curios." A little bell chimed as we pushed the door open. The air inside was thick with the smell of lemon polish, old paper, and dust. An elderly woman with kind eyes and a cloud of white hair looked up from behind a counter, cluttered with porcelain figurines. "Well, hello there," she said with a warm smile. "Can I help you two find something?" "We were hoping you could," Chloe said, stepping forward. "My husband, Jake, he grew up around here." The woman's eyes settled on me. "Miller? No, Miller boy had red hair. You must be Jake Miller. My, you've grown." "Mrs. Henderson," I said, my voice cracking a little. "Yeah, it's me." "It's been a long time, dear," she said, her smile widening. "What brings you all the way back here?" My carefully constructed boxes were all breaking apart. I just started talking, the words tumbling out. "I was looking for an old house, the Davis house. It was just down the street, next to the Petersons' place. A white house, blue shutters. They had a daughter, Sarah. We used to play together. I just wanted to see the place again. But it's gone. It's just an empty lot." Mrs. Henderson listened patiently, her head tilted. She picked up a small silver teapot and began polishing it with a soft cloth, her movements slow and deliberate. The smile never left her face, but it changed. It became softer, tinged with a kind of pity. When I finished, she set the teapot down with a quiet clink. She looked right at me, her old eyes clear and certain. "Oh, honey," she said, her voice as gentle as old velvet. "You must be mistaken." The air in the room went cold. "That lot," she continued, picking up her polishing cloth again, "that lot's always been empty. Nobody's ever built a house there, not in my lifetime, and I've been on this street for nearly 70 years. My world tilted on its axis. The floor felt like it was dropping away from me. "No, you're wrong.
The Davis family. They lived there. Mr. and Mrs. Davis, and Sarah. They moved away suddenly, back when I was 8. She stopped polishing and looked at me again, her expression full of a deep, uncomplicated sympathy that was 1,000 times worse than disbelief. "Jake, dear," she said, her voice dropping to an almost whisper, "there's never been a family named Davis on this street. I've known every soul who's come and gone from Elm Street since the war. The Petersons, the Millers, the Clarks, but no Davis." She paused, leaning forward slightly over the counter. "People always said that land was no good for building. Something about an old well they filled in decades ago makes the foundation unstable, they say." The bell over the door chimed as someone else came in, but the sound was distant, like it was coming from the end of a long tunnel. Chloe was saying something, her hand on my back, but her voice was just a buzz in my ears. All I could hear was the echo of Mrs. Henderson's words. Always been empty. No family named Davis. And an old well they filled in.
The whole drive home, I didn't say a word. I just sat there, staring out the window, watching the world I thought I knew dissolve. My entire life, I'd had this memory, this solid, unshakable thing that explained who I was. And in the space of 10 minutes, a kind old lady with a polishing cloth had taken a hammer and smashed it into 1,000,000 pieces. I think that's the point where I broke, Mike, right there in that dusty antique shop, because all the logic, all the neat and tidy explanations, they were all gone. I was left with just the questions, the real questions, the ones that had been hiding under the floorboards for 25 years. If there was no house, where the hell was I playing? If there was no Sarah Davis, who was that little girl? And if there was no cellar door, what did she walk into in the middle of an empty fucking lot?